Welcome everyone to Little Tokyo Two's new podcast series From Startup to Growup. We offer short, sharp 20-minute overviews and interviews of successful founders, as well as 40-minute extended founder interviews with successful people who have graduated from LT2. I'm your host, founder and CEO of LT2, Jock Fairweather. Today on From Startup to Growup, we interview Rhys Furner, the head of partnerships for Shopify APAC. He gives us some really interesting insights on how to start a Shopify account and website if you're just getting into business, and also some really interesting insights on how to optimize and get some more traffic to your website as an existing business. Shopify has a really interesting business model, and their sales distribution methodology will be really insightful to all of our listeners. Enjoy. Rhys, how are you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jock. I'm very good. Thanks for having me.
My absolute pleasure. So, man, tell me a little bit about your history and then how you got into Shopify.
Sure, yeah. So I am a QUT graduate from back in the day, and I got really lucky, actually. I was living on the Sunshine Coast and doing uni down here, so the amount of times I've travelled on the Bruce Highway is insane.
Have they used you in one of their advertisements and claimed you as a QT?
A University of the Real World. No, I'm still waiting on the call up. So if anyone from QUT is listening, send me send me the details.
All the time.
Yeah.
20 years down the track.
Send me the details. But I got really lucky. I actually finished my degree and started applying for a few jobs, and I remember driving down for an interview on the Friday at a digital agency here in Brisbane and had an interview, and it went really well. And then I was driving back to the Sunshine Coast after the interview, got the call, and they said, "Hey, we want you. Can you start on Monday?" And I had no house down here. I was still living on the coast, but I said, "Yep, let's do it." And I ended up kind of surfing on some mates' couches for the first little while until I got my own place down here. But largely started in the digital agency space. So doing lots of digital marketing, SEO, Google AdWords, those sort of things. Not a lot of design and development, mainly on the marketing side. So I started there, and that was great. I cut my teeth, learning about all of that stuff, and I mainly worked in the sales side. And I also, where I probably stumbled across something really early in my career was that I looked at our offering and I thought, well, so many other digital agencies do design and development, and they don't do what we do well, and we don't do what they do well. So I actually set up a whole partner program at this agency, and very quickly that became my focus, and all of a sudden we're getting about 50% of our revenue coming through these other digital agencies from all over Australia.
How long ago was this?
This is going back 2010, 2011.
Cool.
So I built out this kind of agency network, I suppose, an agency partner program, which was quite unique. Lots of tech companies have these partner referral programs, but not a lot of service-based businesses. So I started that, and I got to know a lot of different agencies from around the space, and and then probably the next milestone was that I started my own e-commerce business about 4 years ago. And I went through the whole process of figuring out, sourcing product, building a brand, which e-commerce platform do I use?
You used Magento, didn't you?
No, I didn't use Magento. I actually started on Shopify, which was really good. So I did a bunch of research, and I can't remember the exact reason why I chose Shopify, but I imagine it just looked good, and I'd heard of it before, and I jumped on and started doing that. And that's how I became really familiar with the platform. And then naturally my interest gravitated to that, and we started doing more and more e-commerce marketing at the agency. And the turning point for how I got into the role at Shopify was that I was speaking at an e-commerce event here in Brisbane, and there were two other people on the panel. One very good friend of mine, Nathan Bush, who's very well known in the e-commerce circles, and another guy, Jason Bowman, who was the one employee at Shopify in the whole APAC region. So I met him there, and then basically I had a coffee with him afterwards saying, hey, how can we as the agency get involved in what Shopify is doing? We want to do more stuff with you guys.
He said, how can you as the head of the partnerships get involved with Shopify?
Exactly, yeah. So it turned into something that I totally wasn't expecting. And he sent me the job description. I had a look and I just thought, wow, like this is just written for me. And so I applied, went through the interview process, which is quite lengthy at Shopify. They're very big on finding the right cultural fit and entrepreneurial people, and the hiring process is quite good. And then I found myself on a plane over to our head office in Ottawa in Canada for a couple of weeks of onboarding, and then came back and ripped into it, and here we are about 17 months later.
Unreal. So if we just go back a little bit, when you say you were helping market e-commerce companies through the agency, what does that exactly mean?
Yeah, great question. So when I look at e-commerce businesses, and I think from a marketing perspective, there's 4 core metrics that I look at. So firstly, it's traffic. Secondly, it's
to the website.
Traffic to the website, yep. Secondly, it's conversion rate. So typically a conversion rate is generally about 2 to 3% as an average.
On a homepage or just
across the board? Across the board. So about 2 to 3% of visitors that land on an e-commerce website should typically convert. And that, depends on the purchase as well. Like if it's a more expensive purchase, then it's probably going to be less.
Why is it so low? 3% sounds like people are going to your website for a reason, right?
Yeah, you'd think so. It's an interesting concept because you see, I see some, things online about it. It's kind of like walking into Woolies or Coles and leaving the trolley and kind of walking out, right? It is an interesting concept. Yeah, I suppose people are very, very worried about making the wrong decision. So it's kind of the paralysis of choice. There's a great TED talk on that, which I love. And people have so many options as to where to buy their money. And when people, where to spend their money. And,
how do you buy money? I'm just
yeah, no, I wish I knew that. Yeah. So I basically look at conversion rate, and there's a lot of different steps in the conversion process. So some people are browsing, then they move through that decision-making process, and it does take time, unfortunately. So here and there is the sporadic.
And sometimes it's really annoying. They don't go all the way through your beautiful funnel that you've built. They've come and checked it out and left for a while, come back a week later, and then just go straight to
leave
purchase.
The cart. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. People take time. They might be on their work computer and then they get home, and might be on their mobile browsing on their commute into work. So it's a fair few factors of that. But I look at conversion rate, and then thirdly, I'm looking at average order value. And that obviously varies dramatically by industry. Your average order value is an interesting metric to try to tinker with and set some free shipping thresholds and things like that around. And then lastly, which is probably the most important metric that e-commerce businesses should look at, is their customer lifetime value. So how often do people come back and buy, right? Because there's always going to be an acquisition cost when you're marketing yourself. So if people aren't coming back and buying regularly, you're constantly having to acquire customers, and that cost to acquire can be expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you talk about a cost to acquire, you mean, for example, a sponsored ad through Facebook? How much do you spend before someone buys?
Exactly.
For example?
Yeah, exactly. So what I always try to look at is I look at those 4 metrics to determine e-commerce. Essentially where someone's at. So if someone's starting their e-commerce business, they're going to be more focused on driving traffic because they don't know any of the other figures yet. Yeah. But if you're a really big e-commerce business and you've been going for some time, you're probably going to be looking at all of those 4 kind of areas. And obviously, tactically, there's a range of different things that you can do across each one. And basically you tinker with all of those types of things. But one thing when it comes to acquiring customers is that you should look at what your ceiling cost per acquisition is. So if you sell, I'm going to make up something random because it's in front of me, a phone case. If that phone case, you want to sell it at $30 and it costs you $15 to buy, then you know that your ceiling cost per acquisition is going to be $15 because the moment that you spend $15.01 to acquire a customer, you're losing. Exactly. So you want to try to figure out what that is, and then that obviously you can set some parameters around what type of activity you're doing to drive sales.
You do that quite literally through experimenting in different kinds of sales methods, right, and marketing methods. So it could be outbound cold methods, or it could be Facebook ads or whatever, and you just got to experiment in order to, you set a hypothetical what I'm happy to spend with, and target market that it could be.
Yep.
And then over time you just iterate it and tighten it up, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Iterate, tighten it up, and always allocate some form of your budget to a bit of a test and learn activity as well. So something new that you haven't tried before. But I also think that one thing that's very scary for e-commerce business owners is that there's literally 1,000,001 different things that they can do. So it can be very tricky for them to know, like, where do I even get started here? Like, I can do SEO, I can do Google AdWords, I could do Google Shopping ads, I can do retargeting, I can do Facebook ads, I can do Instagram ads, I can do Instagram influencers, content, there's all these different things. So it can be very scary at first, but what I would say to most business owners is just start with a handful of things and try to do them really well instead of spreading yourself too thin.
And kind of fish where the fish are. If your particular target market doesn't look at Instagram, but you don't have a very visual product, then don't try and sell it on Instagram.
Exactly right. Yeah, think about, and you don't have to be an expert, you just have to kind of use a bit of common sense to go, okay, based on who I'm trying to get to buy this product, I think they're going to be searching for it on Google, or they're going to be, it's more of a lifestyle purchase. So yeah, they might be scrolling through their Instagram feed, and I might need to look at some great Instagram content as well as some influencer outreach, So there are lots of things, and I understand that it can be pretty scary, but I suppose that's the exciting challenge that lots of e-commerce business owners have to face.
There's something that you said earlier is really interesting about the fear of spending your money on the wrong thing. I mean, there's so much choice. The first thing I kind of think of is kind of like maybe a car. You wouldn't just go on the Ford shop and buy a car, literally, would you? You'd have to go and test drive it.
Yep.
And I think mostly, right?
Well, today, yes. Tomorrow, I don't know. Maybe one day we will be buying cars online. Who knows? Will cars exist in the future?
Well,
who knows? That's a whole other
podcast. We'll talk about that. How you guys are working to maybe make that experience possible, where you just buy without literally or physically going to try. I was speaking to someone this morning who'd bought a pair of shoes from Shoes of Prey. Do you know that?
Yep. Great Aussie e-commerce brand.
Yeah. So one of the head data analysts is here at LT2 in the capital. Anyway, so I speak to him all the time, and I used to be in luxury women's shoes, so I know how much money I would have bet against them not working, basically, because they've done everything against what's meant to happen in luxury fashion. Anyway, one of the biggest problems I saw is that women don't often buy shoes online unless they've already bought that previously in shop, because shoes are so fitted to your foot, right? Anyway, this lady I spoke to this morning, she said, I've got kind of like an average size foot, so it's quite easy to buy shoes online. And she said, I bought only one pair from there, and they turned out really nicely, but I had another 10 or 20 design that I would have bought, but I didn't really know what the leather would feel like or what the actual real colour would be in real life. And she said, I would pay Shoes of Prey $10 to send me a set of swatches, so that I could literally physically feel them and go, cool, I'll actually buy these things. Yeah. She sent that feedback to Shoes of Prey. They didn't do anything with it, but
yeah, it's a cool idea, and I think that online retailers have this. Well, I think natively it's in a lot of successful online retailers to put the customer first, and it's a very customer-centric led approach, and that's why we're seeing these amazing online brands, come out and do very well, because that barrier to entry is now a lot less. Platforms like, I'll do a shameless plug, but platforms like Shopify make it extremely easy to get started. So that barrier to entry is really gone. It also means
the competition's through the roof, though.
It does, absolutely. It means the competition's through the roof. So brands that do really put the customer front and center, if that's something that customers want, they can do it. Logistically, it's incredible what can be done now. Like, there's a really cool brand that I really love everything that they do called Koala. They're a Shopify.
Mattresses.
Yeah, they sell mattresses. So who would have thought that you'd buy a mattress online, right? Very similar. You think you'd go and you'd lie down in the shop and
their
try
video ads and stuff aren't really complex.
No.
They probably film that on their phone.
Yeah, super simple brand, and they've done it extremely well. They're now launching a couch, and they're wrapping different products around their mattress. So they've now got a bed base, and they've got sheets, and they'll do probably a similar thing with the couch. They'll start wrapping a few different areas, but they revolutionized it, right? it can be delivered in Brisbane, Sydney, or Melbourne within 4 hours of purchase.
Wow.
And it's flat packed. You get it out of the box, and it's amazing that it fits in the box, and then it expands out, and they have thousands and thousands of really positive reviews, and they just literally looked at a market and went, you know what, how you buy a mattress right now is broken.
Yes.
And basically they said you don't have to walk into a big, retail store and be harassed by a salesperson and lie on, 20 different mattresses, and then you get it home, and then you don't really know after a while.
So how do you think they were able to build the trust in the product so that online you could literally just buy it and kind of be happy to spend the money and hope that it was comfortable?
Yeah, so they do a couple of things that's really cool. So firstly, the really quick delivery, I think, is a very good thing that helps get people across the line. But secondly, they have a 120 night sleep guarantee. I think it's 120. Don't quote me on that. But basically, you can take this thing and lie on it, sleep on it for a good amount of time. And if you don't like it, no questions asked. And because they've got such a good logistics network that they've built out around their product, it's easy for them to come in.
And the trick is, we have no idea how they got it in the box.
Yes,
so even if you wanted to send it back, you couldn't be bothered.
We have no idea how they got it in that small box, yeah. But a very cool business, and that's what I love seeing. And I'm really privileged to be able to see these type of entrepreneurs who are often really young people that are looking at these industries or products and going, you know what, this is broken. And our technology allows these guys to get to market so quick. So that time to value is extremely strong with our product. And that's what makes me feel very happy and lucky to just see these guys go, you know what, let's challenge this. And away they go. And it's quite incredible. That's what makes me get up every morning.
So how's Ford going to get me to buy a car without going and trying the car?
I think I don't know how to answer that one. It would be very, very interesting to see what happens in that space. I think for me, I think you're either a practical person with cars that you buy it to go from A to B.
Yes.
You hear that saying all the time, or you buy it for the experience. So you're a bit of a rev head and you like to go fast and whatnot. Whether that experience can be replicated online, I don't know. I think
you mean the latter?
Well, either.
Okay.
Potentially for someone from A to B, that might be a little bit easier. But I think the challenge with cars is that they are typically the second highest, costing item that someone buys outside of a house. So
and probably mortality, like death cause something too.
Yes, yeah. So look, I don't know. I'd like to see some brands challenge that, but. Like I said earlier, will we be driving cars in 20 years' time?
Saab should do it. That should make a comeback.
Yeah, you reckon some of the ones that have folded over the last 50 years just start coming back purely online?
For sure.
Be interesting. I don't know if you could fit it into a small box and then it expands out, with 4-hour delivery, but interesting concept. If anyone's listening from an automobile manufacturer, let's talk.
Some sort of program to 3D print it or something, I'm sure.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. So if I were... two scenarios. If I were someone who was looking to get into e-commerce, like I like to sell watches, I want to sell watches or something like that, how should I go about it? And give me a couple of tips. If I'm a current existing, probably somewhat successful e-commerce business that's in LT2, we have a number of them, what's some really interesting insights you could give that maybe a secret for them to improve?
Yeah, sure. I think that if you're thinking of getting started, so you want to, we used the watch example before. I truly believe that today is all about, if you want to build this type of product, it's all about brand, and you'll hear several people at Shopify, if anyone out there is a bit of a Shopify geek and follows closely, we always, we like to say that brands live on Shopify and commodities live on Amazon. So if you go to Amazon to shop, you're typically purchasing on price, right? You're trying to find a very simple product at the lowest possible cost. To counteract that, if you're wanting to start an e-commerce business, don't try to compete on price because you're never going to win that race, right? It's just impossible. So you've got to compete on the brand. And a guy in the US who runs a really successful Shopify store, one of the things that stood out to me that he said is that your brand is your sustainable competitive advantage, and it's so true. So think about outside of the product, what's your brand stand for? Why are you starting this? What's it all about? What are you going to do if this thing is successful? And I think there's a real trick in that, because I'm seeing with a lot of successful brands that there's a different element to their business, and a lot of the time it's around a corporate social responsibility type of thing. So Koala, who I mentioned before, the mattress company, they do a lot with saving the koalas. And I think this is a really powerful element, because when you think of traditional businesses, there's marketing dollars out to generate revenue in, and it's kind of this ongoing cycle. But what happens if you actually put profit back into something that makes a difference, in the world, and allows you to be happy with what you're doing and contributing? That actually creates a whole different marketing angle as well, that is really, really powerful. And I think we're going to see more entrepreneurs over the next, hopefully sooner, but the next 10 or 20 years, who actually set out to create social good, and there's a product that helps, that enables them to do that. So I think I would challenge anyone out there that's thinking about doing it. Like, why are you doing it outside of trying to make some money? And I understand that some people are driven by, just challenging themselves and creating something cool, but think about the bigger good around what you want to do. That will really give you a good brand angle. And I think that's something that not a lot of people do. But definitely think about brand. Secondly, it then comes about product, obviously. So you've got to think about where you're going to manufacture it. Are you going to go through a manufacturer in China? That's going to be painful. It's going to take a bit of time to figure out who the right manufacturer is. They're all going to have different minimum order quantities. You're no doubt going to have a challenge in getting the product to you. Are you going to just ship it to Hong Kong, potentially from China, and then fulfill globally from Hong Kong? There's a lot of different considerations there. But yeah, think about the brand. That's front and center. That's your sustainable advantage right there. If you're an existing brand, hopefully you've done a fair bit of that, and you're up and running and you're doing pretty well with your e-commerce business. I think that being Australian, we are naturally hugely entrepreneurial as a country. We were talking before this podcast just about how many businesses there are in Australia, and we're really, really lucky. 2.2 million businesses right here in Australia. It's insane. And to put that in a context, when you look at a country like Canada, they have 10 million more people, but half the number of businesses that we have. So we're really, really lucky. So I think that one challenge that we have on the back of that is that we outgrow our own market very quickly. Being 25 million people, we do outgrow that very quickly. So naturally, we start thinking about entering other markets very early. And some of the listeners will probably already be receiving a lot of traffic potentially from markets like the US or the UK, but possibly a much lower conversion rate, because they might be selling in an Australian currency, or the shipping times are too long, or the shipping cost is too much. So we as Australian businesses have a lot of, or I should say e-commerce businesses, Australian e-commerce businesses, we face a lot of challenges a lot earlier in our business's life cycle than what businesses in, say, the US or Canada or the UK do, because they have bigger markets on their doorsteps. That, I think, is something that really galvanizes Aussie businesses, and I think that's awesome, but it is a challenge. So I'd say to those guys, start looking into where you think you can expand based on the current products that you have. So that might be as simple as making sure that you set up a third-party logistics provider in the US so that you can fulfill US orders from, Kentucky or somewhere in the US, so that you can service US customers very quickly with a lower shipping cost and, get the product to them quickly. That's a natural way to start increasing sales when you're at a particular volume. So that'd be my first tip. Outside of that, if I was to do a generic thing, and again, it depends on your product so much, but, there's no doubt that influencers are this decade's SEO. I truly believe in that, and I see across our merchant base a lot of success through influencers, particularly on Instagram. So, find some people that reflect your brand values and have the right type of audience and produce the right type of content and get your product in their hands. And sometimes it can be as simple as just sending it to them. A lot of the time it doesn't have to be a paid thing. So, I think that's definitely an area that I've seen a lot of businesses have success in, and I'd encourage a lot of, businesses to have a good crack at that.
That's awesome, man. Thanks so much for your time today.
It's been my pleasure. Hope it's been helpful. Thanks for having me.
For shizzle.
And that's it for another week with our podcast series From Startups to Growups. If you enjoyed that, you can find out more about Little Tokyo 2 on www.littletokyo2.com, and you can find more of our podcasts on soundcloud.com/Little Tokyo 2. Thank you, and speak to you next week.